By the end of the war, almost 3,000 Allied ships had been sunk by U-boat torpedoes. In total, 1,131 U-boats entered service before the German surrender, of which 866 have executed war patrols and 785 were lost. The crew numbers aboard a U-boat varied greatly between the different U-boat types and the mission it was undertaking. For example, the relatively small Type II U-boat comprised of 25 officers and seamen, while a Type VII comprised of 45 officers and seamen. A Type IX U-boat had a crew of about 50, and the Type 21 had the largest, a 57-man crew. Sometimes the U-boats also carried specialist crews on special missions, such as politicians, spies, or special forces teams. A typical U-boat crew was generally organized into officers, chief petty officers, and seamen. The helm of an U-boat comprised of 4 officers who had the overall responsibility. Of course, the captain was the commanding officer. He had the highest responsibility as he often made life or death decisions affecting the fate of the entire U-boat crew. It was not surprising, therefore, that the crew identified closely with their captain and were especially proud if he had been awarded a medal. The first watch officer was the second in command. He shadowed the commanding officer closely so that he could take command if the captain was killed in battle. His other responsibilities included the boat's weapon system and conducting torpedo aiming during an attack. The second watch officer was responsible for the watch crew on the deck, the anti-aircraft gun or guns, and the deck gun, and he also oversaw the radio room crew. And the fourth officer was the leading engineer who was responsible for the maintenance of the U-boat's mechanics, which included all the engines, batteries, and all the other mechanical systems. It is important to note that the leading engineer also set the demolition charges in the event the boat had to be scuttled. This also meant that he went down with the boat. The enlisted crew was led by 4 chief petty officers. The navigator, who was responsible for the navigation and the supplies, the bosun, who was responsible for the crew discipline, and finally the diesel officer and the motor officer. Both were subordinated to the leading engineer and were responsible for the diesel and electric engines and batteries. Next came the petty officers. Their number varied, but generally there were 2 for every 3 seamen. Petty officers also took turns to stand watch on the bridge. They comprised of different types of specialists, like the torpedo mechanic. His job was one of the most difficult on the U-boat. Even when the torpedoes were safely stowed, the work was not over. Moving the torpedoes was a daily operation. Not only did the torpedo tubes have to be reloaded after firing, but each electric torpedo had to be serviced to assure that it would be ready to fire when needed in every 4 or 5 days. The servicing including checking the batteries for fluid level and also recharging them. The general practice was to service one torpedo a day on a rotating basis. Another very important petty officer was the radioman, who was responsible for all communications and sound equipment. The daily duty time was 12 hours. The day was divided in 3 4-hour watches, and the night hours were divided into 6-hour watches. During the watches, he sent and received radio traffic, coded and encoded radio messages, and used the U-boat's radar devices. And last but not least came the seamen or the Matrosen. They acted as the watch crew on the deck, they manned the guns, loaded the torpedoes, prepared food, and took care of daily operations aboard the boat. The German U-boats in the World War II operated in all oceans on the world and were responsible for sinking enemy ships in areas as far distant as the Dutch East Indies. In terms of human lives, 28,000 German U-boat crew of the total of 41,000 men recruited in the service lost their lives, and 5,000 were taken prisoners of war. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss my future work, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel and press the bell notification button. Thank you, and see you in the next video.